My point of inquiry focuses on anthropocentrism, which is the idea that humans are the most important beings in the world and that nature mainly exists for human use only. My research looks at how this mindset shapes the way society treats ecosystems and living things and whether it prevents us from recognizing the value of nature.
My point of inquiry focuses on ocean rights and whether oceans should be granted legal rights alongside rivers, forests, and ecosystems. I'm interested in this because oceans cover more than half of Earth and support a lot of marine life and affects our climate, yet they're still very much polluted and overfished, and the impact it has on our climate change has been very negative.
So, even though we're looking at different things, we're both really focused on the same big idea how humans value nature and whether that needs to change legally and ethically.
Exactly, and I think connection is what makes this discussion most interesting because your topic explains why people think the way they do, and mine looks at what we could do about it in terms of law and in terms of action that humans could take.
When I started reading about anthropocentrism, I realized how deeply it is built into society. Even when people care about the environment, it's often because of human benefit, like clean water, food supply, or economic stability. From when we are young, we're taught that the environment is there to give to us. I remember being in the classroom and we learned that air is for oxygen, we need water to survive. We never learned that the environment is its own being and has its own way of living. Nature is only really seen when it benefits humans overall, and when nature is no longer capable of giving us the things we need, humans turn a blind eye.
Right, so that connects directly to oceans and my point of interest. Most ocean protection laws today are based on the benefit it has toward humans and not the ocean's own value because it does hold value, and indigenous people argue that is that humans are using nature as a way to benefit themselves rather than feeling included within nature. We're not two separate entities, we're one. And for example, we in grocery stores there's always like a seafood section because we rely on fish, not necessarily because the ocean ecosystem itself has rights, but because we need them to survive, but we really don't. And that's what people see when they see a boat. When people are go fishing, they don't see the negative impact it has on the ocean because there's such a idea of overfishing and people are doing it too much to benefit humans. No one really thinks about the effects that it has on the ocean's ecosystem, and granting the ocean rights would protect that. Um, so yeah, that's how it really connects directly to oceans, and the ocean protection laws are really important because it's pointing out that it's not just for human benefit and oceans have their own value.
Right? And that made me think if we always view nature through a human centered lens, then ecosystems are always going to be secondary. This is seen in the Calvo 2020 article where he discusses about plant intelligence and about how plants aren't passive organisms, but no matter how much scientific evidence shows that plants and living organisms have their own ways of being intelligent, humans have decided that since it's not the way that intelligence is seen through humans, that it doesn't matter. So this becomes an issue because if humans are always has this idea that nature is less valuable than us, then no amount of scientific evidence is going to be able to persuade us to save the environment when we think that the environment is only there for us. But it shows that when the environment is in danger and resources are becoming limited, that directly affects us, meaning that nature could even be seen as more valuable to us overall. And this is where the rights of nature becomes important.
Right, because rights of nature tries to shift the mindset that ecosystems are not meant to be property. And I think that's really important to note because this day and age, economics and money seems to play a big part in this world. And it's not really considered when we consider nature because we just see the environment as property, not as an entity with legal rights and something that could be fought for in court. And that's where Stone becomes really important for both our projects, and he really helps dive deeper into both of our objectives. So I use stones should trees have standing a lot within my argument and a lot within my writings this semester. Stone argues that natural objects like trees should be able to have legal rights in court, and he also touches on the importance that there of interconnectedness and how we're all connected and we all rely on each other for something. And he touched on how trees branches and stuff like that. So I thought it was really important, and I've been using it a lot in my writing. And to touch on the fact that he thinks nature should have legal rights in courts. This means that they should be represented in a legal matter instead of only being protected indirectly by humans who have the interest to protect them. And most do not have that interest, and that's why there's such an environmental crisis.
I also use stone because it directly challenges anthropocentrism. If a river or forest had legal standing, it forces society to stop thinking of nature as just an object, but something that holds value. I feel like when we talk about the legal system and things that go through court, we automatically deem them important because that's what the legal system is surrounded by. So, giving the environment and living organisms like a chance to be represented and get the voice that they don't have could be really helpful in helping fight the environment damaging over time. So, in the article, Should Trees Have Standing? Christopher Stone argues that natural objects should be given legal standing. And this is his main point throughout the argument that we need to put humans and living organisms equally and not have one override the other. And Stone challenges the belief that only humans deserve legal rights and protections. He argues that nature should be given the voice it lacks through legal standing and representation. And at first glance, the idea does seem a little unrealistic because we can't expect a river or an animal to appear in court. But Stone's really not suggesting this, that nature has to actually show up in court, but for a representative who advocates for nature to show up in their place.
Right, and this for oceans specifically is a really big deal just because oceans aren't confined into certain areas. Like rivers and forests have their certain dimensions and they have their certain areas that they cut across, but oceans are literally across borders and across different countries, and it literally stretches throughout the entire world, and they are the global ecosystem that needs to be supported. And there really aren't, like, at all, and that's the issue. And again, they make up over 50% of our um or of our planet, and they aren't being supported and aren't being represented. So Stone's idea raises the question to me personally of who's going to represent something this large, and how is it going to be represented? Because if we think about it, when laws are created, they take a lot to be created, but they take even more effort to be reinforced.
That's a really good point. I think that really highlights one of the major weaknesses of anthropocentrism thinking and systems. Even when people recognize that oceans, forests, rivers, and other ecosystems are important, they're often valued primarily for the benefits they provide to humans rather than for their own existence. I feel like if the environment didn't give us the resources that we need, like food, water, you can even say animals, air, humans would pretty much neglect the environment overall. I feel like it wouldn't even be a thought because without them giving us the benefits, we kind of treat it like we're like a laborer to it. And as a result, nature is frequently treated as a resource to be managed, exploited, or protected only when human interests are affected. This way of thinking makes it difficult to grant nature legal voice or representation because legal systems are genuinely designed around human rights, property rights, and economic interests. So I feel like even if legal systems and representation was put in place, this way of thinking has been embedded in generations of humans that it still would not make an interest. And I think that this goes down to the root problem that moral responsibility is the reason for our environment failing. It has nothing to do with legal representation or even scientific evidence that we are damaging our environment. It comes down to the way of thinking.
Exactly, and that connects to the major issue that I kind of already touched on, and it's a major issue within my research as well, and that is enforcement. Even if we grant ocean specifically, but in nature in general, rights and we finally get these laws to be passed, we should still need a way to enforce these rights across countries because humans won't do something unless they're interested in it or agree with it. And as of right now, unless like us we're taking this course so we understand what rights of nature is all about and why it's important, not everyone's going to get all the information that we're getting. So it needs to be enforced in a way for everybody to understand it and everyone to agree with. Because if you think about it, if we all agreed that nature needs to be protected, then the environment wouldn't be at damaged as much as it is. So enforcing it is definitely the major issue here, and it needs to be spoken about more. And we need to speak about what's going to happen after the laws are enforced.
Do you think anthropocentrism is the main reason oceans are still not granted stronger legal protections?
Well, in all honesty, before taking this course, I had no idea what anthropocentrism was, and I had no idea what it was, even just reading the word. It's a big word, but in the end, I do think that it's one of the main reasons oceans are not granted legal protections. Even when environmental laws exist, the human impact um, is obviously more important than the law being in place. By this, I mean even though the law is in place, that doesn't mean that people are changing their actions and impacting the environment in a way that the ecosystem could regain its health. So if pollution doesn't immediately affect humans, it is often overlooked. But because we are not directly affected by this, we're not really focusing in on it as much as we should.
That matches what I found as well. Anthropocentrism makes it difficult for people to even imagine nature having independent value because it places humans at the center of moral, legal, and political decision making. This isn't just an idea that is modern, that has been modernized. I feel like this issue has been generations of just neglecting the environment and not teaching individuals that the environment is not just here to serve us, but it's here as its own living thing. Under this framework of plants, animals, rivers, and ecosystems, they're often judged according to how useful they are to human beings rather than being recognized as entities with value of their own. Overall, this is creating a hierarchy where humans are always at the top while the rest of the natural world is viewed as existing primarily to serve human needs and desires. I find this to be kind of interesting since if humans need to rely on the environment all the time, that should be kind of concrete evidence that the environment is serving some sort of value to us. It's not as though humans aren't using the environment at all, but we're actually abusing it so much that it's causing negative effects to happen. So, if we're relying on the environment, it clearly is serving its value. And if it's serving its value, then it does deserve legal representation in court. So, I feel like a lot of the thinking that is going on contradicts itself over time.
Right, and I really like your example about the hierarchy. I think it's the perfect example. Um, when it comes to oceans, oceans are a really good example when we consider the hierarchy you mentioned. They're treated as a resource to humans rather than their own living entity. And this mindset makes legal protection even harder for them because they're not seen as their own entity. And so, therefore, they're not seen as something that deserves their own legal standing. And when it comes to humans, it's difficult because humans see themselves too as top of the hierarchy, which is really difficult to overcome because when you think that you're so high, you think you're above everything else, it's really hard to change that mindset in everybody. And I think a lot of people have that mindset. And with humans, we need to be the ones to reverse this damage as much as possible that has been done to the environment and more specifically oceans here. Um, and we need to be the ones to reverse it and we need to be the ones to protect it and respect it, but we need to change our mindset on how we view ourselves in regards to the environment beside us. So Stone is suggesting that giving nature legal rights could change how society views it, which is really a big thing to say because society as a whole is so large, and to change everybody's view on one thing is going to be really difficult. But do you think legal rights would actually shift the public eye, or just would be a symbol of what should be done, even though it's not being enforced?
I definitely don't think that legal rights would do as much impact as individuals may believe. I think it would be there as a symbol, like kind of as, oh, humans are finally trying to do something for the environment, but I don't think any action will be taken by it. I think this all comes down to the root of the problem, that it has kind of just been embedded in, humans' minds for generations and probably generations to come, that the environment is here, but we kind of overrule the environment. Since the environment can't speak and can't, act out against what we're doing to it, I feel like that is also a power trip. Humans believe that they're more superior to living organisms because we are able to speak and communicate with each other, and that is kind of the branch of intelligence that we see other organisms don't have, so we kind of deem them less valuable. I think it would be a start to helping the environment move into better standing, but I don't think it would carry on for years. I feel like it would be a year-long thing that people are finally getting on the bandwagon to helping the environment, and then I think it will die out.
I totally agree. I mean, if something is, we look into social media today and we look into how we get our news, and we don't really see much about our environment and what's going on to it through social media. And honestly, we don't really see it through the news either. So once somebody hears something, it's really about word of mouth. And because that's the case, it spreads a lot slower and will probably die out a lot quicker. But even if the enforcement is difficult at first, the legal recognition alone would could shift how governments and different corporations make their decision based off of the environment. But it's truly all about the enforcement and all about how we spread this information. I mean, again, simply through word of mouth isn't going to work, and we have to find a higher um, power to share this information because it's going to die out quicker. I totally agree with you.
And over time, that might reduce anthropocentric thinking because people would be forced to consider nature as something with its own rights and not just something else. But I don't think it's something that would stick. Back to your idea, I feel like it really would just be a phase. It's kind of like how on social media there are phases of things. There's movements, but they never really last. It's kind of like, I'm here to make a difference, or I'm here to start something, and everyone's very excited about it. But as soon as it comes down to actually doing what needs to be done, people kind of don't want to be bothered. I feel like this all really also ties into Pope Francis's way of thinking. In his text, he does state that our modern times, our way of instant gratification through the internet, has become very detrimental to the way that we view nature. I think this is totally right. I feel like we have the world at our fingertips. And when we can't get something done quickly, we don't bother with it anymore. And since, kind of helping nature get out of this hole of all of the damage that we've caused over the years is a long term issue and a long term problem, I don't think humans want to be bothered with that. I think that goes back to how social media posts and awareness are all quick fixes, but then when it comes down to the real problem, we kind of turn a blind eye.
Right, and I really like that you mentioned Pope Francis and his writing because his writing was so influential from the time that he wrote it and till he died, because he had such a large opinion on this matter, and a lot of people will argue because he had a religious standing that it was based off of his religion. But then when you compare his work to other activists for the rights of nature, you'll see that he's absolutely right. And although he does implement God and his religion into his writings, his words are absolutely correct when, again, when you compare it to others. But I just think that it's really important for oceans because right now they're being treated like property. So it's really important for articles like Pope Francis's article and other articles like Stone's we just talked about to be seen, because legal rights could completely change the framework of oceans only being um, there for human consumption. And honestly, not just oceans, other parts of nature as well. I just like to focus on oceans because the especially in Pope Francis's article and in other articles that we read, we tend to just say nature as a whole. But when we think about it, we're thinking about rivers, forest, and lakes and stuff like that. So it's kind of honing in on oceans right now is really important because it's not really spoken about much in a lot of the articles that we read.
Tanasescu talks about how rights of nature can sound good in theory, but enforcement is one of the biggest challenges. Overall, how do you see this applying to your argument about oceans?
I think oceans make enforcement even harder because they are so large. They cover so much of our planet, and one country protecting the ocean doesn't work if another country is polluting it. And I think that's probably why oceans aren't really considered in a lot of the rights of nature's arguments, because they're so large and it would be a worldwide law. But obviously that's not a thing. But it's something that an a, as a planet we all need to agree on, which is close to near to impossible, I believe, to get everybody agree on one thing. But that's just probably why it's so hard to enforce something, because it crosses international borders.
Honestly, that makes a lot of sense. So even if anthropocentrism shifts and laws change, enforcement is still a structural issue. I feel like this is seen in a lot of text where we see there's concrete evidence scientifically, ethically, even legally, but enforcement is the main problem of all of this. It seems like changing how people think about nature is only part of the solution. Even if society begins to recognize that, in your argument, oceans have this intrinsic value and deserve legal protections, there are still many other factors to consider, like political, economic, and international barriers that could prevent those protections from being effective. I feel like it gets a little complicated with oceans because the oceans are so vast, and I know different countries kind of control different parts of the ocean. So this would have to be a worldwide movement. And I think instead of, the United States taking action on the environment, we would have to get the whole world involved. And I know that individuals from all over the world have different beliefs, they have different ways of thinking, they have different ways of valuing certain things. So I think there would be a lot of issues with enforcement and how to go about this. I do believe that the rights of nature movement can really do help reshape how we think about ecosystems and living things. But the system, I feel like, has to be very practical, and it has to be something that we can do, not something that we can just talk about.
Right, exactly. And I think it's hard to really it's hard. I mean, again, like we were both saying, there's a lot of political aspects and different cultural aspects of what people's intentions are. And I really think I'd really love to hope that everybody has good intentions regarding nature and how we should treat nature and our oceans. But Tanasescu kind of points out that even though we could have these great intentions, they're just not ever going to be enough, because unless we're acting on them, then maybe it's different. But because our intentions might differ in so many ways, they might not agree with each other. And that just really applies here because many countries claim they care about their environment, but their actions don't follow. So the United States might be thinking this is our action toward caring for our environment and nature and doing what we've done to our planet. But say another foreign country thinks that what we're doing is quite the opposite of how we should be caring for nature. So because we don't have this collective agreement, it's really difficult to come to a standpoint on what is good for our environment and what could be good for our ocean because it's so vast.
So honestly, like taking away what you just said, I feel like it's almost like we need to shift two things at once. A mindset shift away from this human-centered thinking and a legal shift towards rights of human nature and how we can go about those systems. I feel like if only one of those changes happens, the overall impact might be limited. So even if our generations move away from this human-centered mindset and we start caring about the environment, that's very different than actually acting on it. And then on the contrary, if we do believe that living organisms and systems deserve legal representation in court, and we're okay with it, we still need that process to kind of unfold itself. We still need people to represent them in court. We still need, the justice system to get on board with this. So I feel like even if the ideas are good, there's still a lot that has to happen behind the scenes. But what I find really interesting is that many of the authors we studied seem to support different parts of the transformation. I feel like all the authors do believe that the environment is being damaged over time. I mean, there's scientific evidence from Calvo, there's scientific evidence from Cardinal, and Calvo challenges the assumption that humans are the only intelligent beings worth considering. Um, and through plant intelligence, where on the other side, scientific evidence is showing that biodiversity and other forms of the environment are being damaged due to the actions that humans are taking. So I feel like together these perspectives suggest that changing both our worldwide view, our human centered view, and going about the change may be necessary to create lasting protections for ecosystems. All right, now we're moving on to, do you think that society is actually ready to accept that oceans have value beyond human use?
I truly don't think we're fully there yet, as much as I wish we were, but I do think we're slowly getting closer and closer as people begin to educate themselves. Um, Climate change and a lot of other economic damaging are forcing people to realize that ecosystems are not unlimited resources, that they are dying out because of what humans are doing to them. But because unless we all agree on the same thing and unless we all understand the same thing, we just aren't going to be fully there yet, because everyone needs to understand that we are a part of nature, we are not separate entities, and we deserve to actually, we don't even deserve, nature deserves to be treated as such because we are treating them so poorly.
I do agree. I felt like we won't be there for a little while. I think that goes back to how we value living things and ecosystems. If we're not ready to accept, even animals, as, valuable, I feel like it's going to be harder to accept something like the ocean, because at least animals, they're living, they're breathing. We could see them function in society. We see them functioning with one another, coexisting with other ecosystems. We even have them in our homes as animals. Like, we've learned to love animals, and if that is still being put second to human life, I think it will be very hard for humans to accept the ocean. Not because the ocean is less valuable, but I feel like it's just because the ocean is the ocean. And, we don't really pay mind to certain stuff like that. We don't pay mind to ecosystems and rainforests and oceans. So if we're already putting animals and these living species that we are able to interact with as second to us, I feel like it would be very hard to see humans finally accepting oceans.
Right, exactly, which is why the rights of nature has just proven to be so important, and people really need to kind of understand the rights of nature and what it stands for and not just turn their head to it because they don't know what it is. But the rights of nature doesn't rely only on the impact of humans. It relies on our thoughts toward nature, it relies on our opinions towards nature, and obviously those two things will depict how we impact the environment. But I really hope that people start to understand why rights of nature is so important and kind of brush up on their facts about it and not turn their eye because they think it's a ridiculous idea that nature could have a impact on that we could have an impact on nature as drastic as we have. And it's really important that nature has these rights so we could further people's knowledge on why it's important and why they need to be enforced.
Yeah, I fully agree. And to honestly wrap everything together, I feel like my research really shows that anthropocentrism is deeply shaping the way that humans interact with nature. I feel like it has just been a part of the way we think and the way we respond to the environment for years. And now, when we try and protect the environment, we do that from a human centered perspective, which is still putting the environment and living organisms second to us. And in order to finally see ecosystems and value, we need to shift our thinking to that to that honestly ecosystems and living things have been around before humans. They've functioned, they've served value for years, and we honestly are the ones that came in second. So we need to start understanding that we are all equal. We're all living things. And honestly, while these protections are important, they can unintentionally reinforce the idea that nature only matters because of what it provides to humans. But through my research, I began to question whether society can truly address environmental problems if we continue viewing nature primarily through a human lens. Many of the authors we study challenge that assumption by arguing that nature has intrinsic value that exists independently of humans' interests, but I can see from my research that even scientific evidence is still not enough because when humans read it, we're still reading it from a human centered perspective.
Right, totally. And I think another argument that people may see is the argument between ethics and science and what we should be following. But my research on ocean shows that this mindset has a lot of real consequences. The mindset that we are above nature and that nature is here existing specifically for us. But oceans are very essential to life on Earth, not just for marine organisms, but for us as well. Again, they control our climate, but they're still treated as resources instead of systems with their own value. And I think it's really important. And some of the arguments that I have toward it are the pollution and overfishing, but that's just a couple. And we could just go into COVID and when people were saying to save the turtles because of all the plastic that was in the water and stuff like that. We think that this has been going on for so long and that people are just now trying to open their eyes to it because during COVID when that was trending online, that's why everybody was seeing it. But everyone was just seeing it and saying that we need to stop polluting the ocean, but not really doing anything about it. So again, it's more, yes, laws could be passed, but enforcing them is the most important aspect of it. And spreading information obviously is important, but we need to spread information with the intention of enforcing the information that's being spread.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like when we go back to Stone's argument about legal standing, and that helps us bridge our two ideas together because it challenges the assumption that only humans can have rights. His work encourages us to rethink who or what deserves representation within legal systems. And incorporates honestly living organisms and ecosystems to finally be equal to humans, and I feel like that can really be significant in the rights of nature movement. But then it also raises the question of how we're going to go about this. Because as I said previously, it would be really silly of us to assume that we're just going to bring a river, a lake, an animal into court for legal representation. We're also going to have, individuals, specialties of the field that are, that believe in this enough to have action to show up to court and to have concrete evidence that this is happening because of this and that. And I think this is relevant to both of our projects because it's a practical way to move beyond our human centered thinking. Since I'm arguing that everything under the umbrella of living things and ecosystems deserves protection, and you're arguing oceans, we're kind of both bridged together that this could be an idea that changes the environment for all of us.
Right, and then if we follow back to Tanasescu's, he reminded us that enforcement is still going to be the challenge, and I know you just kind of touched on that a little bit, and I touched on it before, but that doesn't really mean that the ideas that we have spoken about aren't worth pursuing and aren't worth fighting for, because without them, then we really will make no difference, and we will make will make no impact and we will just keep damaging our environment to the point where we have no more resources.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall, both of our projects point to the same conclusion, and that we really need to rethink and redefine how we view and value nature. I think whether we approach the issue through scientific evidence, ethics, legal theory, or, legal theory overall. But many of the course authors challenge the belief that humans are separate from and superior to the natural world, which we are saying, but only through a different lens. I think if societies continues to measures nature only according to its usefulness, um, over time we're not going to have the environment to benefit from. I think that if we continue with this human-centered mindset, whether it be in like 100 years or 10,000 years, um, society will eventually harm the environment to the point where we cannot no longer rely on it. And I think then humans will be able to see the value that the environment had. Because, they say when you're without something, you kind of start to understand its value and its absence. And I hope that it doesn't get to that the environment is in such a hole that we can't get it out, and the humans now want to fight for it.
Right, and whether it's ocean specifically or just ecosystems in general, rights of nature could be just the way to move beyond this anthropocentric thinking and really make an impact on everything we've spoken about today.